Have you ever wondered why there are people who seem never to be provoked? Even when attacked, misunderstood, or challenged, they can still smile, say little, and yet make others adjust their attitude. While most of us react instantly to even a small jab, they stand firm, unmoved by anyone. Carl Jung believed that emotional self-mastery is not a skill to learn, but a state of consciousness, where you understand your own mind so deeply that no one can control you through emotion anymore. He said that most people do not truly live. They merely react, driven by wounds that have never been healed. When you feel angry, hurt, or offended, the problem is not with others, but with the unacknowledged parts of yourself. In today's video, we will explore 7 Jungian principles, 7 steps to master your emotions, understand the mechanism of anger, and remain at peace even when the world is in chaos. These are not tips to stay calm, but a true journey of mastering your mind, turning reaction into awareness and emotion into wisdom. Stay until the end of this video, because you may realize no one can make you angry unless you give them that power. Number 1. The one who truly makes you angry is not another person. It's the unacknowledged part within you. Have you ever wondered why certain people can make you lose your temper with just one sentence, one look, or even their silence? Some days you feel perfectly in control. Then someone shows up, says something trivial, and rage rises in you like a wave you cannot stop. You try to breathe, stay calm, but inside you boil. You think, why do they make me so angry? In truth, they don't. They simply touched a part of you that has not yet been seen or healed. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Others don't really control you. They merely trigger something in you that you haven't yet understood. When someone irritates you, it's not because they bring the anger, it's because they've pressed on an old wound that already existed. Imagine you're driving peacefully when suddenly someone cuts you off. If your mind is calm, you just shake your head and continue. But if deep inside you already carry feelings of being disrespected or overlooked, that small act ignites you instantly. Not because it's serious, but because it revives the old sense of "I'm not being respected" buried long ago. The anger doesn't come from them. It comes from your memory, from the pain that hasn't been acknowledged. Instead of suppressing it, ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Every anger is a letter from the unconscious. If you dare to open it, you'll find an unhealed wound or a part of you longing to be recognized. Once you realize this, you no longer pour your rage outward, but begin to speak with your wounded self. I know you feel disrespected, but I see you. When that part feels seen, the anger dissolves naturally. There's an old story Jung loved to quote. A student asked his master, "How can I stop being hurt by others?" The master smiled. "If someone offers you a gift and you don't take it, who does it belong to?" "To them," replied the student. The master said, "Exactly. If someone insults you and you don't accept it, the insult still belongs to them." Every time we get angry, we've unconsciously accepted the gift others throw at us, allowing their energy into our inner space. Think about what triggers you: a partner's silence, a parent's criticism, someone ignoring you. Silence can awaken the fear of abandonment. Judgment recalls memories of being belittled. Neglect rekindles the pain of not being worthy of attention. Once you understand that, others no longer have the power to make you explode, because you know the anger isn't about them, Emotional control doesn't mean not having emotions. It's the ability not to let emotions rule your actions or peace. Anger is not bad. It's a signal showing you where you are still incomplete. When you dare to face it, you move closer to the wholeness Jung called the self, where consciousness and the unconscious merge into one. This is the first art of emotional mastery, not to run from anger, but to listen to it. Not to blame others, but to use your reactions as mirrors to see yourself more deeply. Because when you understand who within you is reacting, you stop reacting unconsciously. You begin to choose, and in that choice, you become free. Remember, no one can make you angry unless you give them that power. Each time you feel like reacting, pause, breathe, and ask, which part of me is being touched right now? Just one moment of awareness is enough to step out of emotional victimhood and become the master of your inner world. Others may act, speak, or provoke, but you know the anger doesn't come from them. It comes from you, and therefore it's within your control. Number 2, anger is the language of the forgotten part of you. Once you realize that others don't actually make you angry, the next question arises. If not them, then what is this anger really saying? Every emotion isn't just a reaction, it's a language. And if you are silent enough to listen, you'll see that anger isn't an enemy, but the voice of a part of you that's been forgotten for too long. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." Every time you try to suppress anger, you make it stronger because you're silencing a part of you crying out for attention. Anger doesn't come to destroy peace. It comes to remind you that something inside needs to be seen. Think about the last time you truly lost your temper. Maybe it was when someone belittled you, ignored your opinion, or made a joke that hurt. What rose inside wasn't just fury. It was the feeling of being dismissed, forgotten. And if you look closer, before anyone else did that, you had already done it to yourself. Dismissing your own feelings, ignoring your limits, staying silent when you should have spoken. The other person merely mirrored that pattern, and your anger erupted as a desperate attempt to finally be heard by yourself. A therapist once told the story of a woman who always exploded when her husband didn't help around the house. She felt neglected, disregarded, and furious that he seemed not to care. But when asked, "When was the first time you felt left alone?" she broke down. She remembered her childhood, her mother working tirelessly while her father never helped, and her 8-year-old self silently promising, "I'll never let anyone treat me like that." Years later, she was still fighting the same old wound, only in a different form. Her husband wasn't the cause of her anger. He was the trigger for the child within her who once felt powerless and unseen. That's how anger speaks. It doesn't use words, it uses reactions. When you shout, it's not because you hate the person, but because a part of you is screaming, "See me, I'm still here." And if you're brave enough to pause amid the storm, instead of trying to be right or to win, you can ask, who within me is speaking right now? This is the beginning of inner dialogue, the conversation between you and the forgotten parts of yourself. Jung believed that every part of us, even those we fear or reject, holds wisdom. Anger, if listened to, can teach you something about your true needs, respect, acknowledgement, or simply rest. But instead of listening, we react, we shout, walk away, or pretend it didn't happen. And by doing that, we repeat what the world once did to us, ignoring ourselves. Jung called this soul fragmentation. When a part is cut off from the whole, it returns as extreme emotion demanding to be recognized. Jungian therapists say every repressed emotion is like a child locked in a dark room of the soul. It knocks, begging to be let out. But we turn on the TV, work harder, scroll endlessly, anything to avoid hearing it. Until one day, the knocking becomes too loud, and we call it anger. Yet if you open the door, you'll find no monster, only a tired child needing your embrace, whispering, "You heard me." That is the real power of emotional mastery as Jung taught it. Not suppression, but listening. When you decode the language of emotions, you no longer fear them. You can sit with anger, observe it, even thank it, because it shows you where healing is needed. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Anger is part of that journey, pain trying to transform into awareness. And when you can dialogue with it instead of running away, you take the first step toward mastering your inner world. Emotional mastery doesn't mean not feeling. It means knowing that every feeling exists for a reason. When you listen instead of repress, you turn reaction into awareness, chaos into clarity, and anger into subtle intelligence. From here, the journey ascends to a new level, from reaction to observation. Because as Jung said, between stimulus and response, there is always a space, and in that space, freedom begins. If you've ever had such a moment, when anger made you realize something deeper within, share it in the comments. Your story might help someone understand that behind every outburst lies not evil, but a soul longing to be seen. Number 3. Reaction is reflex. Observation is power. Once you see that anger isn't caused by others, but mirrors what's unhealed in you, Jung takes it further. You cannot control the world, but you can control the moment right before you react. That moment, between stimulus and response, is where all human power resides. Jung said the unconscious person lives like a puppet, pulled by strings of emotion they don't understand. They get angry thinking they've been insulted, suffer believing the world is against them, while in truth, they're reacting from old programming. But the conscious person, who has learned to observe instead of react, will not let the outer world define their inner state. Between the moment you're about to explode and the moment you stop, there is a tiny space where you can breathe, see, and choose. If you react, your past speaks for you. If you observe, your awareness does. And in that second, you stop being the puppet. You become the one holding the strings. Power here isn't domination. It's freedom. The freedom not to let anyone control your mood, not to let anger drag you into chaos. Jung believed that the moment we pause to observe, we step out of the unconscious. Only then do we truly choose instead of merely react. In the Bible, when Jesus was crucified, people mocked and tortured him. In a situation where anyone would react with rage or despair, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." That wasn't only forgiveness, it was the highest expression of emotional awareness. He didn't act from instinct or pain. He observed from a higher level of consciousness, seeing that others' anger was born from ignorance. When you stand as the observer, you no longer get caught in others' emotional dramas. They may shout, accuse, provoke, but you see clearly, this is their energy, not mine. Like someone sitting on the shore watching waves, you see both the wave and yourself, and thus you are not swept away. In Jungian therapy, there's a simple but powerful practice. Pause for 3 seconds before speaking or acting when emotion rises. Those 3 seconds are the bridge between unconscious and conscious. In them, you breathe, feel your body, and ask, "What's really happening inside me right now?" That short pause doesn't just calm you, it raises your frequency of awareness. A female leader once shared how she practiced this during conflicts. In a meeting, a male colleague publicly criticized her strategy. The room went silent. Instead of defending, she smiled and asked, "What makes you think that?" She listened calmly, without tension or justification, just observation. Afterward, that same colleague came to apologize for being too emotional. She didn't need to prove her power, she was power. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In the moment you see your anger, you are no longer the anger. You are the one holding the light, no longer chasing your own shadow. Emotional mastery doesn't mean becoming a statue, but staying conscious in the storm. Like a Zen master in a tempest, the wind blows, the rain falls, yet the mind remains still. That's the true freedom Jung spoke of, when you can stand amid chaos and still choose clarity. Remember, the greatest power isn't making others fear you, it's that no one can make you lose yourself. Each time you choose observation over reaction, you reclaim fragments of your soul scattered in impulsive moments. With every such moment, you become more whole, more free, the master of yourself. So next time someone provokes you, stop, take a deep breath, and remember, as long as you can observe, no one can truly hurt you. Number 4, let emotions speak, but don't let them command. Once you've learned to observe anger without being swept away, the next step is learning to let emotions speak, without letting them take control. Carl Jung emphasized that emotions are not to be destroyed, but to be understood. They are the soul's language. He didn't teach repression, but listening without surrendering the wheel. Because when you suppress emotion, it doesn't disappear, it only sinks deeper, silently influencing you. Anger, jealousy, sadness, all carry messages. They're the soul's messengers saying something inside needs attention. Anger says, "My boundaries are being crossed." Sadness says, "I've lost something meaningful." Jealousy whispers, "I want permission to live like that." When you stop to listen, each emotion becomes a mirror revealing what you lack. Not an enemy, but a map guiding you back to yourself. When you feel emotional heat rising, instead of reacting, try silence for a few seconds. The quickened heartbeat, the tightness, that's not weakness. It's the signal saying, "I'm hurt." If you breathe and acknowledge it, you prevent emotion from turning into action. You choose to listen rather than obey. Neuroscientists found that simply naming an emotion begins to regulate it. When you say, "I'm angry" or "I'm anxious," the amygdala, the brain's emotion center, calms down, while the prefrontal cortex, the reasoning part, activates. Awareness itself restores control. That's exactly what Jung meant by, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." A designer named Laura in New York once said she used to lose sleep whenever clients criticized her. After Jungian therapy, she learned to let emotions speak. Whenever upset, she wrote 3 questions. What is this emotion saying? What is it protecting in me? What can I learn by listening? She realized she wasn't angry at clients. She was angry at herself for tying her worth to perfection. Once she saw that, criticism became information, not threat. That's the difference between emotion mastering you and you mastering emotion. When emotion speaks, you can listen, reflect, learn. But when emotion commands, yell now. Prove yourself right, you've lost freedom. Jung believed true freedom doesn't come from controlling others, but from no longer being controlled by invisible forces within. Ancient wisdom illustrates this through the chariot and the driver. The horse is emotional, powerful, alive, capable of taking you far, but also capable of dragging you off cliffs. The driver is conscious. If holding the reins, he directs the horse. If not, he's dragged. Jung saw emotions as natural energy, not bad, only needing direction. You don't kill the horse, you learn to ride it. Shakespeare once wrote, "Give sorrow words. The grief that does not speak whispers the o'er-fraught heart and bids it break." That line echoes Jung's spirit. What you deny controls you. What you listen to frees you. So instead of asking, "How do I stop being angry?" ask, "What is anger trying to tell me?" Emotion, once recognized, becomes data, no longer a weapon against you. When you understand what truly hurts you, you don't need to overreact to protect yourself. When you know your limits, you can assert them calmly, not by shouting. From Jung's perspective, this is harmony between consciousness and the unconscious, where instincts aren't suppressed, but integrated. Like light entering a dark room, you don't chase darkness away. You simply allow it to be seen. Once seen, it loses its power over you. There is no wrong emotion, only wrong reactions. If you repress it, it controls you. If you obey it, it dominates you. But if you listen, it guides you to understanding. That is true freedom, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to feel everything while still holding the reins. If you too are learning to let emotions speak but not command, comment the word "listen" as a sign that you've begun befriending yourself. Number 5. Don't wear the mask of calm, become truly calm. Have you ever wondered why, even after learning to observe and listen to emotions, you still feel exhausted from keeping it together? It might be because you're not truly calm, you're just acting calm. And that's when the journey enters its next stage, removing that mask, so you don't just appear peaceful, you are peaceful. Jung called the persona the social mask, the image we show to fit in, be liked, be accepted, be seen as fine. But when worn too long, we mistake it for our real face. We smile when we want to cry, nod when we want to say no, and pretend serenity while chaos brews inside. Many think emotional control means not showing. They tell themselves, "I must stay calm. I can't be angry." But that's not control, that's repression. And what's repressed doesn't vanish. It waits, emerging as tension, insomnia, or sudden bursts of rage. Repression is not mastery. You can't call it calm when your body is rigid and your mind screams, "I must not be angry." True calm doesn't come from denying emotion, but from understanding its root. Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." When you pretend not to feel anger or sadness, those emotions will return through sudden outbursts or quiet resentment. Real calm begins when you allow yourself to be honest. When you can say, "I'm angry," or "I'm disappointed," not to blame, but to see clearly what is there. A woman once shared that everyone in her family saw her as the peacemaker, always gentle, patient, never raising her voice. Yet inside, She constantly felt exhausted and irritable. She kept her calm because she feared hurting others or being called too sensitive. Until one day, when her child said something innocent, she burst into tears. That day, she realized she wasn't angry at others. She was angry at herself for suppressing too long. From then on, she practiced being honest. When tired, she said, "I need rest." When hurt, she admitted, "That made me sad." And in that honesty, she found calm, not as a mask, but as truth. She no longer needed to act serene, because truth itself brought peace. Anger stopped being an enemy. It became a signal. Fear no longer forced her to stay strong, but helped her see what truly mattered. That's the difference between appearing calm and being calm. You can't master emotion until you dare to face it. If you merely perform calmness, you're living through the persona. But if you observe emotion without letting it lead, you're living through the self, your true essence. Modern psychology calls this emotional transparency, not denying feelings, yet not ruled by them. You can say, "I'm angry, but I won't act from this anger." The feeling is acknowledged, but not allowed to command. Imagine an orchestra conductor. He doesn't silence any instrument, he harmonizes them. Each emotion, anger, sadness, fear, has its place, but none should dominate the music. The conductor only needs to keep the rhythm, and balance naturally follows. Calmness isn't rigidity. Sometimes it's the courage to say, "I'm hurt," instead of pretending you're fine. It's the softness of self-understanding, not the armor of fear. Jung wrote, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the opposites." True calm doesn't come from eliminating emotion, but from merging the heat of anger with the clarity of reason. If you only act calm, you live in tension. If you understand what disturbs you, you live in awareness. And awareness brings real peace, deeper than any mask can offer. So when someone irritates you, don't force a smile or say, "I'm fine." Be honest. "I'm angry, but I won't let it control me." Calmness isn't performance. It's the fruit of knowing yourself deeply. Number 6. Transform rather than retaliate. Turn the energy of anger into clarity. When you no longer have to act calm but are truly peaceful from within, you reach another level of emotional mastery, where anger is no longer a fire to avoid, but energy to transform. There's a paradox few see. Anger doesn't weaken you, reacting does. The moment you explode, you hand your energy to someone else. But when you pause, feel the heat fully, and don't act impulsively, you hold in your hands a raw life force Jung called psychic libido, the energy of life, instinct, and transformation. Jung didn't tell us to always stay calm. He wanted us to understand what happens inside when anger arises. Anger is the soul's raw voice when it feels boundaries crossed. But instead of listening, most people do the opposite. They yell, attack, prove. In truth, they're not fighting others. They're fighting their own pain. Yet if you stay and look deeper, you'll see that behind anger lies feeling disrespected, abandoned, denied. And if you're brave enough not to retaliate, you begin to transform that energy. Like Princess Diana, after a marriage of betrayal, she had every reason for revenge, but chose the opposite: silence and compassion. When the world expected a furious woman, she appeared in hospitals holding hands with HIV patients at a time when even a touch was taboo. That gesture changed how the world saw compassion. Diana once said, Carry out a random act of kindness with no expectation of reward. One day someone might do the same for you. That simple sentence carries the essence of what Jung called turning dark energy into the light of consciousness. Another woman once said anger changed her life. She lived with a husband who belittled and controlled her. For years, she either stayed silent or exploded. Until one day, when he mocked her again, she stood still, listening to her body, her heart beat fast, breath sharp, then slow. She didn't react. That night, she wrote to understand. Then she realized she wasn't angry at him. She was angry at herself for allowing disrespect for so long. From that day, she never shouted again because she had reclaimed her power. That is transformation. Not avoidance or suppression, but holding energy long enough for it to turn into awareness. Jung called it sublimation, the transmutation of instinctual energy into consciousness and creativity. When you achieve that, you turn primitive reaction into spiritual strength. Anger then becomes your teacher, showing where you still need healing. Once you grasp this law, you start seeing anger as a tool, not an enemy. It says, something in me is being touched. If you react, you miss the lesson. If you stay, you gain illumination. Like fire, it burns if you touch it blindly, but warms if you know how to tend it. And like fire, the energy of anger, when held in awareness, becomes the light that clarifies everything: boundaries, needs, truth. Neuroscience agrees with Jung. Emotions are energy flowing through the nervous system. Harvard research found that if you pause for just 90 seconds before reacting, the amygdala's storm naturally subsides. Those 90 seconds are the boundary between unconscious and conscious, where anger can turn into wisdom. And then something miraculous happens. What once triggered you no longer does. Not because you've become numb, but because you understand energy. You begin to see anger not as a destroyer, but as a guide, showing you where you lack boundaries, self-respect, or forgiveness toward yourself. And when you observe instead of retaliate, that energy turns into clarity, a quiet light others can feel without you saying a word. Then you'll realize, emotional mastery isn't about defeating others, but about conquering yourself, gently, steadily, powerfully. If you believe true strength lies not in retaliation, but in transforming anger into awareness and compassion, like this video, as a signal to the universe that you're ready for a higher level of inner peace. Number 7. Don't let others define your mood. Most emotional storms in life don't come from big events, but from small things: a comment, a look, a silence that makes you feel not good enough. Once you've learned to transform anger instead of retaliate, your journey rises to the highest level, not just controlling reaction, but maintaining your center no matter how the world moves. Jung said, "The more a man lays stress on false possessions and the less sensitivity he has for what is essential, the less satisfying is his life." When your joy, sadness, confidence, or disappointment depends on someone's words or actions, you've lost your center. You live not from within, but from reflections in others' eyes. And that's when, as Jung said, you lose freedom, because you let others decide your worth. Look at today's online world. One negative comment can ruin someone's night, while 100 compliments can't make them believe in themselves. That says nothing about social media. It says their center lies outside. Mastery means pulling that center back in, not letting others decide when you're happy, hurt, or worthy. Jung's point is clear. Inner freedom comes when you stop vibrating to others' frequencies. Someone who insults you has no power to make you angry unless you believe their words hold more truth than your inner knowing. Someone who abandons you doesn't make you worthless unless you believe their presence defines your value. A woman once said in therapy that whenever her boss criticized her, her self-worth collapsed. She worked twice as hard, checked messages constantly, waiting for praise to feel good enough. But journaling revealed she wasn't afraid of her boss. She was afraid of being seen as useless, just like in childhood, when her mother would go silent every time she made a mistake. Then she understood. Her pain wasn't from today's criticism, but from the inner child still craving approval. When she held that child and said, "You've done enough," the fear vanished. Peace didn't come from others changing, it came when she no longer needed their validation. Jung called this individuation the process of returning to your true self. When you connect with the self, you no longer need the world to confirm you, because you already know who you are. Every compliment becomes an echo, every insult a passing breeze. One image Jung loved was the still lake. When your mind is calm, the world reflected in you appears clearly. But if the surface keeps rippling with praise and blame, all reflections distort. Mastery isn't about avoiding the wind, but returning to stillness, where you see clearly without being swept away. True strength isn't in what others think of you, but in being yourself, no matter what they think. When criticized, you can smile. That's their opinion, not my truth. When praised, you can thank them without depending on it for your worth. Because you know real value doesn't come from the world's reaction, but from your awareness of yourself. Strong people aren't those never affected, but those who return inward every time they're touched. They can feel anger or sadness, yet don't let anyone define their mood, because they know emotion is a choice, not a reflex. When you live like that, you realize freedom isn't controlling others. It's that no one can control you. People may misunderstand, criticize, or leave, but you remain at peace because you no longer need to prove anything. As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Remember, mastering emotions isn't about not feeling, but about knowing you decide when your heart is calm. When your center lies within, the world may be loud, but you remain quiet. Others may praise or condemn, love or hate, but your inner light stays steady. You don't need fair winds or witnesses, only the courage to keep your own light. For that is the highest form of power Jung spoke of, the power of one who does not let the world define their soul. A person who truly masters their emotions is like a silent sculptor. They don't cut away ugly parts, nor rush to polish themselves to appear composed. They patiently carve each reaction, each anger, each wound, knowing every mark shapes maturity. From there, they walk through the world's chaos with a grounded soul. If you've ever asked, what allows someone to stay peaceful amid chaos? The answer isn't suppression or numbness. It's self-understanding, knowing where anger comes from, what fear is saying, and where true peace resides. Once you understand the language of your emotions, you're no longer controlled by them. You begin to steer the mind's direction. If this video resonates with you, share it to spread awareness of inner strength. the kind that doesn't need to prove, only to be. And don't forget to subscribe, because the journey to emotional mastery doesn't end here. It begins now, the moment you choose to look within instead of seeking outside.